Good day and welcome. My name is Ishka Olsen and today we will be talking about Vodacom. Just a quick overview of these are the group members, of course. As you can see, this is just for your own benefit. These are the student numbers. Please note that it is not in the order of presentation. Then just a quick overview of what we will be presenting today. We're going to start off with an introduction, followed by analysis, and last we will conclude. And if there are any questions, please keep them to the end. You'll be given instructions on how to proceed. Now I just want to do a quick interactive activity with you. Please do not be afraid. I will be participating, my fellow colleagues will be participating, and please be honest and just put up your hand when you are required to do so. By a show of hands, whom of you knows this ringtone? Look around you. Now by another show of hands, who of you knew that it was Nokia's ringtone? Now if you look around you, you'll notice that more than 50% of us put up our hands. Why is this? Probably because more than 50% of us has at least once in our lives had a Nokia phone. That indestructible one that if you throw it against the wall, it won't break and you can still continue using it. Now, by another indication of hands, please put up your hand if you use Vodacom as your network provider. Now, those of you who put up your hand as a network provider, please indicate if you knew that it was red, that Vodacom uses red as their stigma. Thank you. Now, what has this got to do with anything? Well, to put it all into perspective, just like the do-do-do-do-do-do with Nokia, Vodacom uses red. This is association. How is it achieved? Through firstly, a good reputation, and secondly, marketing. However, we will just be discussing the good reputation through corporate governance. Now, you are here today because we are here to talk about Vodacom. And I want you to please watch this clip with me so that you can understand what I mean when I say that if you use Vodacom, you are ready to arrive in Africa.
When you arrive in Africa, you realize that Africa has arrived. This continent was once upon a time the black sheep of the world. Today, it's a shining beacon of possibility and prosperity. All along, one partner, born and bred in Africa, believed in it enough to change it, believed in it enough to invest the time, money, and effort to make it stand tall amongst the best in the world. Once upon a time, these streets were dusty avenues that led nowhere. Today, there are more than 500,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable running beneath them, connecting every single building to the rest of the world with high-speed data as quick as you'll find anywhere. Enabling businesses to grow and people to communicate, entrepreneurs to prosper. Once upon a time, the sky above us was as empty as it is infinite. Today, world-class satellites roam about freely, connecting even the most remote and rural parts of the continent to our bustling city centers, ensuring that everyone can share in the bounty of our continent. Once upon a time, networking in Africa was done person to person. The essence of this hasn't changed, but today we can stay in touch with world-class VPN networks, video conferencing and hosted call centers that feature the most advanced security and flexibility in the world. We have cloud capabilities as vast as the continent itself. We no longer need to look beyond our own borders to store, manage, and process big data. Once upon a time, even the most basic medicine was a million miles away from where it was needed the most. Today, we can take healthcare and medical treatment to any corner of the continent, no matter how remote or how poor. And healing our people doesn't even require people. We have machine-to-machine solutions that know their ailments and medical history even better than they do themselves. Yes, Africa has arrived, and the world is now waking up to the possibilities. And Africa does things her way.
Now I hope that you can see from this video that we just watched that Vodacom is in fact ready to arrive in Africa, and that Vodacom is also the largest service provider in the whole of Africa, not just in South Africa, but the whole of Africa. It is in fact such a successful company that it is listed on the JSE and is a top competitor. But with great success comes great responsibility. What is this responsibility I'm speaking about? It is applying King Code 3 of good corporate governance and adhering to the Companies Act. Now, as you can see, Vodacom is extremely popular, and this is done through the sample that they took. As you can see, the SACSI score is based on the popularity of how people would rate Vodacom, based on customer service and if they're happy with it or not. And as you can see, it is a score out of 100, and Vodacom is standing on 76.7%, which is the highest out of all of the competitors, as you can see on the screen. The sample is based on a percentage on which people are rated. As the companies are taken, Vodacom is obviously the largest because it has the largest percentage, as you can see up there. Now, to just put us all on a playing field that we can understand, when I say King Code 3, it's a code that is based on principles and practices which companies are encouraged to practice. To do this, sorry about that, as you can see the clicking went a little bit wrong there, but this is done so that the companies implies a good environmental standard for their employees to work with. It's ethical and it yields good results and a good reputation. Now, how is this good name of Vodacom achieved? It is obviously achieved through applying King Code 3 and adhering to the Companies Act. Through doing these two things, Vodacom remains a top competitor and maintains their good reputation. The focus of corporate governance rests on these four aspects: ethical leadership, risk management, audit committee, and relationships with stakeholders. Now, I will just be giving you a quick overview of what each of them entails, as my colleagues will be presenting them in detail. So ethical leadership is how Vodacom applies morally correct principles. This is, for instance, encouraging employees to not be corporate spies. And if they do notice that there is a corporate spy, notifying management that there is a corporate spy, because you don't want your data to be leaked, if you know what I mean. Risk management is steps that the company take to minimize the threats proposed, such as things that prevent external people from hacking into the system, and also threats from inside the company, such as theft or so forth. Now, the audit committee is of course a requirement of the Companies Act, if you are listed on the JSE, which Vodacom is, but it is also good to keep financial statements up to date and also up to standard. Relationships with stakeholders is perhaps the most important out of all of them. It is the link between the company and the stakeholders. Now, you might ask, what are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are all the entities that are interested in Vodacom, and with those entities, I am saying it is the directors, the employees, the shareholders, the clients, the suppliers, anyone who has an interest in Vodacom. Why is it so important? Well, if you don't have a good relationship with your clients, and if you don't have a good relationship with your employees, you have nothing. Investors will not invest in your business, so you cannot grow it. You won't have clients, so they won't be buying your product. Therefore, you will still not be able to grow. Now, I'm not here today to convince you that Vodacom is the best network provider. I'm also not here today to tell you that you should switch to Vodacom if you're not already with Vodacom. But I am here today to tell you that this presentation is about facts on how Vodacom has achieved such a good reputation, how they have built on it, and how they maintained it through good corporate governance. We will now be looking further into the rest of the presentation, where my colleagues will be addressing ethical leadership.
Hi, I'm Dion Zunkel, and today I'll be talking about the ethical leadership and the importance thereof. Ethical leadership is important because if these principles are applied correctly within Vodacom, they will have a positive impact not just on the economy, but the environment and society as well. These are the principles that would need to be applied by Vodacom to ensure that ethical leadership is achieved. Providing ethical leadership based on an ethical foundation ensuring that the company is and is seen as a responsible corporate citizen, and ensuring that the company's ethics are managed effectively. Now let's look at the steps taken by Vodacom to ensure that the standards and principles are applied. When it comes to the ethical foundation laid by Vodacom, they have a social and an ethics committee within the company. Now what these committees do, they just ensure that the standards are met, the ethical standards are met, and it's applied throughout the company. Tools used by Vodacom to ensure that ethics is applied through the corporate ladder effectively and efficiently is the Code of Conduct and training programs. The Code of Conduct is thus there as a guide to make sure what is expected of the employees ethically within Vodacom. The training programs are there to train the employees to ensure that they know how to deal with ethical issues and dilemmas that might arise in certain situations. The following principle is being a good, responsible corporate citizen. Now, what is a corporate citizen? They're just to ensure that the Vodacom make sure that they have a sustainable company, a sustainable environment within the environment they operate in, and as well as sustaining society, the people as a whole. So what Vodacom is doing to achieve the sustainability in these three different aspects is to ensure that they engage with their stakeholders and meet their demands that the stakeholders have. For the environmental sustainability, they have recycled over 160 tons of e-waste in the past year. For the sustainability of a society, they've invested 202 million rand the past year to ensure that a community grows and that it can develop effectively and efficiently. The last principle I'll talk about, and probably a very important principle to be applied, is the effective management of ethics in the company. Vodacom has two ways of doing this. The first way is a whistleblowing line. This is just to ensure once unethical behavior has been if unethical behavior is happening within the company, that people can report it. And it's very important to reward these people who report it. So rewarding, not just reporting on unethical behavior, but ethical behavior as well. Thus we can see that the standards have been met for ethical standards, and thus concluding ethical leadership.
My name is Jamie Merwitz, and I am going to present risk management. What is risk management? It is very critical for the board to implement risk management to ensure control of all the risks that the company is experiencing. That is why the board needs to put up a structured plan as well as an annual risk plan that they will implement throughout the year. The important structure that I am going to be looking at is the Code 3 principles. The board is responsible for the risk management. However, they may be assisted by committees, as long as all the tasks that the committees are doing are evaluated by the board, so that the board ultimately has the responsibility. Vodacom has two risk committees, namely the ARC Committee and the Group Risk Management Committee. The ARC Committee is responsible for analyzing the overall business and identifying all and any risks that are experienced. The Group Risk Management Committee then takes all these identified risks and gets a course of action in order to reduce or eliminate them. Efficient communication is critical because once the ARC Committee has received the risks that are threatening the company, they need to communicate effectively to the Group Risk Management Committee, and both committees need to then speak to the board to make sure that they have done the procedures correctly. Levels of risk tolerance Risk tolerance is very critical because without having risk in the the company would not be encouraged to exceed their expectations. However, you always need to have control of your risks, and that is why they use the word tolerance. It is very critical to take your risks, analyze if they are a priority, a ranking, short-term or long-term, and then to decide which risks are the ones we are going to eliminate and which we can keep to inspire encouragement. And here I have just listed a few of the sections that Vodacom specified for the levels of risk tolerance. Okay, disclosure to the stakeholders is probably the most important part of risk management, because people would only be encouraged to invest in a company that they know are effectively managed and effectively in control of their assets. And on the slide I have listed what a very good disclosure is. So it is complete, timely, relevant, accurate and accessible information provided to the people. Vodacom, in their integrated report, has provided us with the main risks they are facing, as well as how they are planning to combat them. They also gave us a 6-step analysis plan that they use when they do risk management. These are: define the risk, assess the impact, assess the likelihood, classify the risk, treat the risk, monitor and report on it. This concludes that Vodacom does comply with the King 3 principles in terms of risk management. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brendan Fenton. I'll be doing the Audit, Risk and Compliance Committee. So the main functions of a Audit Committee is to report on financial risk, efficiency and internal controls, and fraud and IT risk that a company faces. And they also have the responsibility to oversee the integrated reporting. So Vodacom has established an Audit, Risk and Compliance Committee. This committee, the main role of this committee is to ensure solid risk management and internal control system, and to oversee the integrity of financial reporting. And in addition to this, the committee also oversees relations with the external auditors and reviews the effectiveness of the internal audit function, as you can see here. And Vodacom adopted a combined assurance framework in November of 2011. This is just to raise the level of the assurance that is provided, and this framework identifies risk areas and maps out plans for the audit committee. So the audit committee is one of the most important committees that the Vodacom Group has, and they are tasked with various responsibilities. These are the 3 members of the audit committee, and they are all independent directors. Mr. Brown is also an independent non-executive director as required by King 3. And the responsibilities of the committee, this is just, the committee is responsible to, or they're one of the most important parts to maintain trust of the stakeholders. And therefore these responsibilities need to be included to enhance that trust. These include monitoring the significant risks, effectiveness of processes, management and reporting of tax-related matters, and compliance with the JSE listing requirements. Also, they need to review the group's statements and results. These include the preliminary results, the interim results, and the financial statements and the integrated report. They also report to the board on issues regarding the accounting policies and practices, and also the internal audit. They also oversee the integrated reporting process. And the external auditors for the year, they also appoint, they consider the appointment termination, as well as the fees and the independence and non-audit services of the external auditors. The current year auditors that were elected were PwC, and this was approved by the committee and it was approved at the board. So according to the King 3 requirements, the committee needs to review and comment on financial statements, and this needs to include the summarized information. Also, They need to consider factors and risks that impact the integrity of the integrated report, and then they need to recommend the integrated report for approval by the board, and this was confirmed by the committee. Also, the finance function, they need to review the finance function and disclose the result. This was satisfied, and the finance function is fully resourced by capable employees. Now, the disclosure of the sustainability issues in the integrated report, there was no indication that Vodacom complied with this requirement, and we recommend reviewing it, but this is very immaterial and can easily be fixed, so this is not really a big deal. And they also have to have a defined policy for non-audit services, and the policy for this is just that with the external auditors, they can only do non-audit services when there is no other alternative. And yeah, thanks.
Greetings to the academic staff of KOB 183 and members of EY. My name is Rudolf Swanepoel, and today I have the privilege of speaking to you about Vodacom Limited and their dealings with stakeholders in accordance with the King Code of Governance. But before I begin, I'd just like to start off with a video.
The cup needs to move, the reading needs to be consistent.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. Go to space. I gotta forget about the way. Because I'm happy, I'm alone. If you feel like a room is out of roof, because I'm happy, I'm alone. If you feel like happiness is the truth, because I'm happy, I'm alone. If you know what happiness is to you, because I'm happy, I'm alone. If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Vodacom Limited, as both an entity and a stakeholder in many other spheres, realizes the importance of effectively managing the perceptions of its own stakeholders. This is evident in their dealings with its own stakeholders, as well as their annual integrated report, which includes a comprehensive report on all of its stakeholder relations. Vodacom exercises very effective management of its stakeholders for numerous reasons, which will become more clear in the presentation that continues. The first reason for Vodacom's successful management of stakeholder relationships is the entity's ability to effectively classify its stakeholders into the appropriate groupings. Vodacom realizes that stakeholders cannot merely be identified as internal or external, as this will not allow the entity to appropriately deal with the unique interests of separate stakeholder groupings. These stakeholder groupings include customers, employees, government, investors, suppliers, as well as communities. These groupings further illustrate that identifying stakeholders as internal or external will not suffice, as for example, although customers and suppliers are both external, their interests and needs are vastly different. Secondly, Vodacom's effective management of stakeholders is further strengthened by the fact that Vodacom realizes the importance of being able to communicate with its stakeholders in a manner that is both efficient and transparent. Vodacom makes use of both formal and informal communication channels to be able to communicate with their stakeholders in a manner that best suits their needs. Examples of these formal channels include newsletters, team meetings, the publication of policy engagement papers, as well as formal audits. Informal methods include call centers, social media pages, anonymous employee hotlines, and roundtable discussions. Furthermore, Vodacom realizes that in order to effectively manage its stakeholder relationships, it may be necessary to recruit outside help. This is where the entity enlisted the help of Globoscan, an independent entity that specializes in the field of governing stakeholder relationships. Globoscan, in turn, provides external feedback and advice pertaining to the reputation, sustainability, and general image of the entity. This objective and independent feedback allows Vodacom to optimize its dealings with all key stakeholders. So although the entity does maintain effective relations with all of its stakeholders, there are one or two shortfalls in the governance framework. These main shortfalls are the entity's failure to prioritize certain stakeholders, as well as the fact that there are not sufficient measures in place for alternative dispute resolution. However, these shortfalls can easily be addressed by implementing the following recommendations. With regards to prioritizing stakeholders, an approach must be followed that supports the notion that Vodacom's business environment is ever-changing and dynamic. It is therefore not ideal to have a fixed or static approach when it comes to prioritizing these stakeholders. It is therefore recommended that the entity establishes a conceptual framework approach similar to the one used in IFRS. This will allow the facts at hand to be applied on a case-by-case basis to ensure that the correct stakeholders are being prioritized in each unique case. For example, what happens if the entity follows a static approach that favors shareholders above all other stakeholders in each and every case? This may work for most situations, as shareholders are arguably the most important stakeholders. But what happens when another stakeholder with far-reaching powers, such as the government or another regulatory board, enters the equation? It would not be wise to prioritize the interests of shareholders over a stakeholder such as the government, who has the ability to lead to the eventual demise of the entity if it does not comply with their interests. Secondly, to ensure that Vodacom practices effective dealings with all of its stakeholders, it needs to establish alternative dispute resolution systems that can deal with stakeholder complaints before they become disputes. There is a need for alternative measures, as traditional litigation is time-consuming and draining on financial resources. It is therefore evident that there is a need for an alternative approach to dealing with disputes that aims to protect the resources of the entity as well as preserve the relations with its stakeholders. Thus, if these two shortfalls can be effectively addressed through the implementation of the above-mentioned recommendations, the entity will be able to polish an already shining jewel that is the relationship they maintain with their stakeholders.
I, Vian Oudendal, can conclude that Vodacom has a code of conduct to ensure that ethical leadership is based on ethical foundation. The board encourages this by promoting adherence and punishing any violation thereof. Additionally, an effective risk management system is in place, where the risk committee identify and then analyze these risks. Furthermore, a well-established audit, risk and compliance committee is created. All the members of this committee consist of individuals with the acquired knowledge and skills. Vodacom is a good corporate citizen as it engages with all its stakeholders and does not only focus on financial performance. Vodacom's admirable relationship with its stakeholders can be emphasized by Graylin, the director of Globoscan, when she said, "Vodacom is an excellent example of a leading company that recognizes the value of a proactive stakeholder engagement and the important role it can play in achieving strategic business objectives." To conclude, Vodacom complies in all material aspects with King. Vodacom maintains good relationship with all its stakeholders by adhering to principles relevant to ethical leadership, risk management, auditing committee and stakeholder relationships. Due to the good corporate governance and compliance with King, Vodacom is a successful company yielding excellent results, thus showing you that Vodacom will provide the basis for arriving in Africa. If you have any questions, please let us know and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.